Thank you for joining us today. In today's webinar, we will discuss the preliminary steps in supply chain modeling and planning. This will be part one of a two-part webinar series. Before we get started, we would like to address a couple of items. Q&A can be found at the top of your screen and can be used to ask any questions. All questions will be answered at the end of the slide presentation to the meeting. If we do not address your specific question, we will respond to you via the email address provided in your registration, along with a copy of the slide deck. The recording of this webinar is also available on the Scarborough Group's YouTube channel. All the Scarborough webinars are part of our continuing education program to bring knowledge, equip you with key tools, and discuss a diverse range of topics indicative of today's global and domestic marketplace. I will be joined today by Geoff Chambers, Director of Supply Chain Services, which is part of the Scarborough Group's consulting division.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Tony, for being moderator today.
Okay, let's get right into our presentation this afternoon. Geoff, let's talk about supply chain modeling and its purpose.
Well, this is a really exciting topic for me. After being in the industry many years, seeing the black swan event of COVID and the consequences of what has taken place in our industry from a micro and macro economic basis, as well as the global uncertainties that we've seen come to light. It's unlike anything that I've seen in my 38 years in the industry. So what we've decided to do, because this is going to be so all-encompassing, is divide essentially two webinars into supply chain modeling. And what we're going to do today is lay the groundwork into really the intricacies of what a supply chain model looks like and how it will enhance your company as a whole. But the overall goal, Tony, to answer your question, is develop processes and connect people. When I'm talking about connecting people, I'm not only talking about the internal people within your organization, I'm talking about connecting those tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 suppliers, as well as your contracted carriers, whatever the case may be. It's having that connection of people with information flows, systems, and other key elements. The underscore really that I want to bring about in this webinar is transformation. Because in order to really be on the cutting edge of what you do as a BCO, a beneficial cargo owner, or a manufacturer, or a distributor for that matter, is to embrace transformation. What worked yesterday, what worked last year, doesn't necessarily work today, because we're living in an evolving marketplace. And the overall goal, essentially, of a supply chain model is to embrace that transformation and to improve company efficiencies. Go to the next slide. I ran across something the other day. We all understand that KPIs are key performance indicators, but I ran across something the other day that's really, I thought was really unique and interesting, because it essentially encapsulates this flow chart, if you will. KPI is defined as keep people interested, keep people informed, keep people involved, and keep people inspired. While those are certainly fundamentals and key performance indicators, I thought that was very interesting. Just thought I would bring that to your attention. Let's not confuse KPIs with PAMs. PAMs are performance attribute metrics, and a lot of people get those two confused. KPIs can be measured, PAMs cannot be measured. So it's very important to understand and distinguish the difference of those two. You'll note in the center of the screen that we have supply chain logistics. The goal, and those of you that joined us on our cost containment webinar here last month, I introduced the word holistic. It's very, very important when you embrace transformation is to look at your corporate structure holistically. In other words, when you think about KPIs, you could say customer service has a goal of a 99% customer satisfaction. Sales may have a different goal. Material procurement may have a different goal as well. So it's very important, and the reason why I use supply chain and logistics is obviously with the huge changes that have taken place in supply chain and logistics. It's certainly a core focus, and it has a direct interline to all the different units that are a part of the company, and that's holistically. I'll use one example. We had a customer that we worked with through our supply chain services that was using, their customer service department was using an antiquated formula that was really losing money and the delivery of goods based on zones in the United States. So sales, on the other hand, had their own set of guidelines. While there are intrinsic KPIs within each business unit, it's very important to have that collaboration of a holistic view of the company. And as we know, material procurement, for example, there's been a lot of talk and a lot of stress points on onshoring what you can and nearshoring what you can. How does that affect supply chain and logistics? How does that affect sales? How does that affect all of the rest of the departments? So it's very, very important when we develop what we call, the Journal of Operations calls, a tree of KPIs, that you incorporate all of the business units holistically, gather the groups together, have management teams put together the most important KPIs in their infrastructure and merge those holistically so you can look at the company from a different perspective, and that's from transformation of the way you've currently been doing business.
Will supply chain and logistics always be the center focus of KPIs?
Well, this diagram it's a good question, Tony. Thank you. This diagram is really with a focus on supply chain and logistics. Essentially, as a beneficial cargo owner, manufacturer, distributor, that should be your core competencies in the center. Supply chain is another cost center. If you were going to draw this out from a corporate standpoint, supply chain would be out with operations, production, and so on, and it wouldn't be the focus. Your core competencies is what is the central focus of what you do on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you.
And let's go on to the next slide. Let's talk about the 10 most common transformation challenges. And we know when we talk about change, there are always going to be challenges with change. There have been many, many books written over the last 10, 15 years, back when the term in the 90s, re-engineering, really surfaced, about changing and transformation and challenges, evolving changes. Let's look at the first one. So oftentimes there's insufficient budgets or unrealistic project timeframes for transformation. For an example, it's very important in order to streamline all your business units that you do have a realistic time frame and that everyone is on the same page. Now, the good thing about a supply chain service provider such as us, the outlay of costs are extremely small compared to trying to budget something internally as it relates to transformation. I'm looking at number 2, competing or conflicting functional priorities. Well, we want to make these changes internally. However, we have all of these daily tasks that we're working on. So it's really competing with the time we have in order for us to really dig in to what those priorities are as it relates to change. The third is inconsistent data management across operational and financial reporting. And this is something that we've seen, we've heard about, we've all read different publications about. It's paramount for companies to have a steady stream of very high-tech data analytics that crosses the operation, not only not from a financial standpoint, but again, it's tied to those KPIs that are intrinsic to each business unit across the operation. And again, the word holistic is very important. The fourth top challenge is the lack of the right talent to leverage technologies and solve business issues. We've all heard about labor shortages, finding the right talent, keeping the right talent. If you don't subscribe to a free publication called CFO Dive, there's a very good publication. It's just CFO DIVE. It really talks a lot about recently in leveraging and outsourcing technology because they're trying to streamline their operation, reduce headcount, and reduce expenditures. And that's a big one right there, is the talent. And fortunately, with our global trade services and with our supply chain services as well, we do have the right talent in-house to help you tackle this big transformation challenge. Number 5. Number 5 is lack of time to partner with business due to daily work with volume or responsibility, which kind of ties back into number 2, having the time really to sit down with a business partner and say, look, perfect example for us is we would sit down with every department, for example, and talk a lot about what they do, how it's related to the supply chain. We would take a lot of that work off of you. So that time to partner with business because of your current work volume and responsibilities that you have, we're empowered to ask the right questions and unify those questions, again, holistically. The 6th top challenge is lack of interdepartmental process coordination. It ties right back to the Journal of Operations and their tree of KPIs. When you don't have the interdepartmental processes in place along with the tree of KPIs, then you have customer service out selling product to the end user, possibly losing money, and lack of visibility for a unified effort holistically. Number 7 is the status quo ways of working and resistance to change. This is probably by far the biggest one that I've seen in the consulting work that I've done over the years. So, I've been in worked with customers, C-level executives. They bring in different departments. We sit down and we talk. I've had situations where the one department decides they don't want to participate. We've done it this way for 15 years. It's always worked before. We really don't want to change. There's a really good book called Who Moved My Cheese? It's been out for many, many years. I would highly suggest that your leadership at least reads that, because status quo does not work in today's economy with the changes that are taking place. I had one example where there was one gentleman that refused to participate. So in the transformation or changes that were taking place in their infrastructure, and this gentleman was put back out on the production line. So the companies that are very serious about their business, about their core competencies, do not want to be in the status quo, and do not want resistance when they say it's time to pull the trigger and change. The eighth one is having a clear roadmap or plan. One of the purposes of having a supply chain model and a plan is to make sure that all of your processes and all your functions are clear, are concise, precise for the objectives that you want to reach. And again, back to Tony's question on supply chain being the center of that tree of KPIs, essentially, you want your core competency. You want to focus on what you do best, whether it's creating golf clubs or whatever you're doing in assembly and your distribution, whatever it is, you want every part of your core company to understand where you're going, the direction you're going, why you're going that way, and have that roadmap out and paste it on the wall so everyone can see it, so to speak. Number 9, the lack of change management maturity. When we look at these changes and challenges, the management oftentimes, if I go back to CFO Dive, for example, there's been a huge turnover, and you probably heard on the news on CEOs, CFOs. There's been so many changes taking place in corporate America because there's a constant evolution of the need to change and transform what you're currently doing. So fortunately, we are, experts in that area for change management, and have the backbone and support to help you along. The last one is the lack of collaborative planning and performance management. Again, I can't stress the word collaboration between business units and upper management, as well as that holistic approach in the whole scheme of things. Going on to the next slide. So one of the things that I think that we like to do as a company is really say, okay, we understand supply chain modeling, we understand supply chain planning, but how is business in general at large looking at supply chain service providers? Now, when we talk about statistics, I'm a big advocate for Oxford economics, to name one. We don't use our competition's statistics, and we also use Thomson Reuters, both worldwide organizations, and very, very advantageous to read from their publications that they put out on a daily basis. But so it was polled by 1,000 BCOs and shippers on how successful their collaboration was with supply chain providers. 99% came back and said they had a successful implementation as well as collaboration. And as far as supply chain service, improving customer service, it was 100%. So they had 100% improvement in their overall customer service. The next one is innovation to improve logistics. 92% of those polled out of that 1,000 said that they had an improve in their overall logistics and functions. The fourth one there on the list is the reduction of overall expenditures. Big topic, obviously. 91% of those 1,000 were polled and said they had an overall reduction. And to be precise, the overall reduction on average was around 12%. Now, the interesting thing that I found that I had no idea, I knew it was a high number, was the increase of outsourcing in some capacity to supply chain service providers. And that can also mean global trade service providers as well. That number was 87%, which is a very high number. Tony, I think you'll agree.
Yes.
Of the companies that are really looking to outsource some portion of their business to a supply chain service provider. Next slide. A few more statistics. The first one is 53% of businesses are looking to increase operational efficiencies in their supply chain. Second one, 37% of businesses are increasing collaboration across their supply chain network, including business unit consolidation. Back again, we're almost building a case to what were each slide that we're sharing with you in order to build this model for you to understand the whole dynamics. The third one is 52% of businesses are interested in a greater degree of visibility and analytics from their supply chain provider for resiliency. Resiliency is something, a word that we've all been reading about. Resiliency is very, very important as we plan going into third quarter here and already forecasting into 2024. So resiliency is a very, very important factor. We go on to the next slide. These are some of the key areas that also are from the same statistics. 69% of those that were polled are using supply chain service providers for negotiations and RFP. Now, in 2022 and early in 2023, everybody was doing these mini RFPs. Many RFPs had their day and time. Now, really, in order to focus on 2024 and have a accurate accrual, it's time really to start talking about RFP. I honestly can't think of a better time in my history in the industry of 38 plus years that RFP, if it's parcel express, if it's LTL, if it's truckload, I can't think of a better time to RFP your expenditures in supply chain and logistics. Supply chain planning and management, 42% of those polled were using a supply chain service provider successfully. 43% were outsourcing to their freight pay and audit, freight bill auditing and payment, which we do in-house now. Again, trying to improve efficiencies versus having 4 or 5 people going through paperwork and dealing with freight bill audit and payment. More and more companies are outsourcing that. The next one is supply chain consulting services. So 21% of companies are actually, out of 1,000, are actually getting a supply chain service provider entrenched with their consulting service. And when I say that, I'm talking about holistically. So when we go back to the KPI model, it's all the way back to every department within that organization that they're hiring supply chain consulting services to bring all of those business units together to come up with a collaborative approach in their supply chain. Warehousing and distribution modeling, 43%. We know there's still a lot of inventory for a lot of the CPGs and the BBRs that are out there in the world, the big companies. So warehouse and distribution modeling is another area where it's very important to understand where you are in that process. The next slide. In addition to the analytics and statistics that we just gave you, cross-docking was up to 35%. Reverse logistics was up 34%. PO management, we've heard a lot about PO management in the last 5 years, was up 17%. And fleet management was up 20%. So these are all areas that we work with customers in. We even have our own fleet as Scarborough. So we understand, I actually have a background in fleet management, being a VP of operations for a trucking company. So we understand the dynamics of fleet management, especially with all the new regulatory and compliance laws that are going into effect and or have been put into effect. So those are just some statistics that really shine the light on the importance of outsourcing, and the dynamics of the numbers kind of speak for themselves. Go to the next slide. So I was very fortunate early in my career to work with General Motors and Toyota. This was a joint merger that was put in a plant in Fremont, California. The GM plant closed in 1973. So in my kind of debut into the industry, I had the opportunity to work with Toyota, General Motors, and Toyota, of course, in 1986 was the first, obviously, company or organization that started with this lean methodology. 1986 was pretty well fortified as the new Kaizen methodology. So this is essentially what you're looking at is a lean methodology. This is a Kaizen structure board, and it's very elementary, but it is very people-centric. Where Six Sigma is more mathematical, so to speak, Kaizen is more people-centric, if I had to, say the differences of the two. So the overall goal is to sort out, we've talked about some of that sorting out, to transform some of the avenues that you need to look at within your organization, or have us look at within your organization, to be able to complete, create, and develop a successful supply chain model, organize that specifically from a holistic standpoint, and the disciplines that also follow that sorting out and organization of your company. And then our president likes to use the word, instead of shine, thrive, but they mean one and the same. And that's in order to shine in what you do as a manufacturing entity, a BCO, a distributor, whatever the case may be. So I was fortunately very well versed in lean methodology. I saw that plant, and the name of that project was called New United Motor Manufacturing, Inc. And I watched Toyota take a plant that was a supersized plant in Fremont, California, and essentially take about a third of that entire plant and make it more functional and lean, and produce more cars than it did in that it was a humongous plant. So I watched them take it down to about a third. So my goal was to handle the surface transportation work with the PUC, the charter vessels that came in to put this plant together, and work with a gentleman who was heading it up on the General Motors side. So we're very familiar with lean methodologies. I think it's another underscore when you think of things holistically is everywhere you turn, you think of things holistically, and you think of things as being lean. And the statistics prove that supply chain service providers such as Scarborough are very well equipped. You see the statistics that more and more people are outsourcing for those dynamics to retrieve the benefits of partnering with a company like us. But I just wanted to repeat this one more time on the KPIs, just because I think it's just great. Keep people interested, keep people informed, keep people involved, and keep people inspired. I think that speaks volumes for organizing, developing, creating an effective supply chain model and plan that not only augments what you do best as a core competency, but really gets the people involved. So it really brings organizational buy-in, as well as it kind of eliminates a lot of those challenges for transformation when you start getting unit buy-in. You reduce those number of challenges. Yeah, you may have a multiple sort of challenges within your organization. You may have two or three that really stuck out as being, points of interest. However, with lean methodology and transformation involving all the departments and looking at things holistically are very important. If we go to the next slide, and I'll wrap this up, and I'm not going to go into detail on this, and I'll open it up for questions with Tony here on my side. So there's a lot of supply chain models out there, but what we were able to do is to look at, again, holistically, what makes the most sense that really encompasses what supply chain modeling is, what impacts that it has, and then the variety of different functions that are incorporated in that supply chain model. So you see functional siloed planning, which is everyone's moving away that can from functional siloed planning. And I'll just give you one example of that, and we'll cover this way in depth in our second webinar, just because this is so expansive. Functional siloed planning is essentially saying customer service, you're over here, you have your own PAMs, you have your own KPIs. So it's really taking a business unit and using those as a measurement versus looking at the company holistically. It's using Excel, which is Excel is a great tool. Tony and I would agree that we've spent hours and hours in Excel over the years, and it's just not a functional tool any longer. So we'll really dig into. I'm really excited about the second webinar because we'll really dive into each one of these different units within a model that ultimately create the bottom one, which is a holistic, integrated business planning. And it's sometimes, our world is full of acronyms and logistics, as you know. It's essentially IBP, so International Business Plan, or Integrated Business Plan. So I guess, Tony, I'll open it up for questions. Okay. Thanks again for joining today, and we'll go from there.
All right. What are your thoughts on the supply chain modeling and the return on investment it brings?
It's a very good question, because the average ROI just from outsourcing was 12%. That was from that 1,000 BCOs and manufacturers that were surveyed. So the return on investment soft costs, when you really think about the holistic approach, and when you really think about removing all of the challenges that you have internally to create a transformation that really puts you on the cutting edge of your core competencies, then it's really hard to measure what those soft costs are. But I can assure you that the return on the investment from a dollar standpoint is a minimum of 12%, not factoring in all the soft savings that you have from incorporating a holistic approach.
Do you see supply chain modeling as a part of a company's stability moving forward in 2024?
I see supply chain modeling as being absolutely paramount in coming up with one model, being able to take that model in 2024 and augment it where your business needs to be augmented. I think it's going to be a continuing throughout the years ahead. And that's not even to mention scenario planning, which is another topic that we can certainly get into in another webinar. So to answer your question, Tony, this is a very, very important key feature in keeping you above your competition and on the cutting edge.
And we looked at the some statistics earlier. Do you see those remaining the same or growing in 2024?
I think that's a good question as well, Tony. I think we're going to see, there's been a lot of projected forecasts of what 2024 looks like. A lot of people say that there's going to be an uptick in overall volume, that there's going to be some return, that inventories are going to, there's a lot of customers out there, obviously, that are hoping to release, as much inventory as they can in fourth quarter to the end user. So I see the statistics as a growing number. I think that the amount of outsourcing from all the economic indicators that I've seen, that as companies become more lean, they're going to rely more on supply chain service providers, global trade management, and every way that they can to cut costs to be who they were established as. And we deal with companies 100 years old. One of the companies we deal with is 100 years old. We deal with a lot of companies, and we're entering into our 40th year in business. So we've seen a lot of companies over the years go through a lot of changes, but the challenges that present themselves and this year alone, not to mention the past 3 years, what lies ahead is very important statistically to outsource wherever you can, and to streamline your operation to improve efficiencies, and again, transform whatever possible.
Sounds great. Well, thank you for that. And I think that brings us.
Okay. Well,
go ahead.
Tony, I want to thank everyone again for joining us today. I hope you will join us for the second half of this webinar. Again, we're going to take a deep dive into those units that you saw, the pros and cons of having those units, and really how to develop your supply chain model. Certainly, we will be sending this supply chain deck to all of those of you who registered. We do recognize that some people have scheduling conflicts that were registered that were not able to attend. So everyone will get a copy of the slide deck. In addition to that, as Tony said in the beginning, really Scarborough Group is not only we're not only here to provide products for you, but we're here to listen to your intrinsic needs and listen intently to develop solutions that will best suit your needs, recognizing that one size does not fit all. So thank you for joining us and being a part of the Scarborough Group. We look forward to any questions that you might have that you want to send after. Great, our contact information will be on the deck. Feel free to reach out to Tony or myself, and we'll make sure that we get your questions answered.
Thank you.
Thank you.